Good luck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break, a podcast that features conversations with speedrunners, developers, content creators, and everything in between. Hello, how y'all doing? This is episode 65, and as you can probably tell, is with the one, the only TGH. How you doing, TGH?
I'm doing okay. How's it going?
Good. Fresh off of a GDQ run, nonetheless. I guess
Yep,
I gotta
absolutely.
ask, how'd you feel like it went? Because I gotta tell you, as an audience member, it was so much fun to watch. How do you feel like it went from your perspective?
It honestly, it went about as well as I'd hoped it would. It's it's hard not to feel like some parts of the run could have gone better, especially near the end, near the ending. But as far as a showcase goes, you're not really worried about that during a GDQ run. Like, you just want things to go well and to go smoothly and to come and underestimate and for the game to be a good showcase. So, or for the run to be a good showcase. So, and that's exactly what we accomplished. So we're happy with it for sure.
It absolutely did, and I'm kind of excited to chat a little bit of Zelda a little bit later on. I got to tell you, Zelda still to this day is my favorite game series of all time. So that's definitely one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you. But also, I think one of the perhaps the most is that your process and your dedication to what you do. I've seen it when I've been there, live, and I've seen you prepping for your runs in person, and also throughout your streaming and everything. It's just it fascinates me, and I'm curious. I want to get to kind of like how you go about it and why you do these certain things, because I think especially for those who may be getting started in speedrunning or those who have been doing it for a long time, I think we could all probably learn something from it. So I appreciate you giving the time and chatting it all through. I'd love to start with, though, where you first got like your start in gaming. What are some of your earliest memories of games? What'd you play? How'd you get into this whole thing?
I feel like whenever I'm interviewed for a podcast, I always have to bring up golf because I used to be a professional golfer. Actually.
No way.
Yeah, I was a professional golfer way back when. We're talking 8 years ago, I think.
Wow.
And I ended up quitting. I ended up stopping, and I was left basically without a competitive vice. I was left just like you're going hard, and all of a sudden it just stops, and it's like, okay, what do I do now? I had to find that competitive vice somewhere else, and admittedly, that's not the reason I still speedrun today, but it's developed into something so much better than that, something so much more meaningful than that, and I've realized that there are more important things in competition in my life. But yeah, basically that's where I got started. I was influenced, I was motivated a lot back during that time period by GDQs and just watching VODs of GDQ, of Zelda runs and of Pokemon runs, and shout outs to Keys Run and Shenanigans as well for those motivations too. But yeah, that's basically I don't know, I started speedrunning Pokemon myself, and then started speedrunning Undertale, and it was all downhill. It was all downhill from there. Whichever way you want to think about that.
Right.
That metaphor.
I gotta say, Keith did have one of my favorite tweets during your run, and it was 2 words, pretty simple. He just said "fuck you," and it just sounded like it had so much love and affection behind it.
Oh yeah, all the love and all the affection possible from Keys.
Yeah. So, okay.
I was able to roast him during our interview. It's fine.
It was perfect. It was perfectly timed. No, it's so great. It's obvious you two have respect and love for one another.
Yeah.
That came through. So I do want to ask about the competitive aspect of it. So as interestingly enough, as much as I love speedrunning, I'm not the most competitive person. My partner, my wife, is, and it's one of those things where she's learned to deal with it better, especially as she's gotten a little bit older. Yet it's not something that goes away. And I'm curious if you've had a similar experience? Do you just find a way to channel that, or have you had to change your approach to how competitive you get? How does that influence what you do?
I used to be competitive to the point where I was almost toxic unto myself. Back when I think it really peaked back when I ran Celeste, maybe a year and a half to 2 years into when I ran Celeste, I just began to I began to really be hurting myself running Celeste, not physically, of course, but just emotionally, mentally, like I just began tearing myself apart, trying to improve, trying to get better. And I realized like there was a time to stop. There was a time where I could not put up with that anymore. I couldn't do that to myself anymore. So I just it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, was just to stop and just to like not be as competitive as I used to be. It was hard, sort of a hard transition to make for me from that mindset to like, a much more easygoing one. But it was something that I realized had to be done for the sake of my own mental health. And I was, I was so much better off for it overall.
And so for
And
you, that's oh, sorry, good.
I was gonna say, like, the beautiful thing is though, it hasn't stopped me from speedrunning at all, because like I just kind of speedrun for different things now. I speedrun for my own personal gain, my own personal goals, and I couldn't really care much about what anybody else does, So it was probably the best decision I have made in terms of speedrunning like direction. So yeah, I can't really be can't be sad about that at all.
No, absolutely. I think that's one of the interesting aspects or dynamics, I should say, about speedrunning is that for some, and it can be like to your point, it could be detrimental, but also some it could be healthy, that competition with others on leaderboards and, trying to beat each other's times. On the flip side of it, the other dynamic is you can still be motivated to be competitive with yourself, to constantly improve your own times. And I think that's, as a fan, it's super interesting to see the different approaches, because both can work just as well. On the flip side of it, you have to be conscious of these things, right? You got to be aware of them.
Yeah, like they say, competition pushes the game forward, and I totally agree with that. But like a little competition with yourself never hurt either. So, but yeah, as much as I agree with that, and as much as I still do agree with that, and I'm still a competitive person. Don't get me wrong. It's just like I'm just not nearly as competitive as I used to be, and I'm not to that point where I'm like toxic unto myself anymore. So yeah.
I'm glad to hear that you found something that works for you. Especially it's mentioned, sounds like it was almost cold turkey. It literally was at some point there was just a switch. You had to make a change.
I had to. Yeah. So it was very, very difficult, but yeah, just because of like the type of person that I was, and like I was very stubborn. I still am stubborn, but like it's just it's a transition that was difficult to make.
It's so interesting because I've noticed with those that the competition can bring performance to a level that may not otherwise be reached by us as individuals. For some people, I'm not saying this is all people. I'm making some generalizations, but I have seen those that excel sometimes push themselves to limits that others just can't get to. And so I got to imagine, especially as somebody who's played these games it's at that level that you have, that has to be also a little bit frustrating, when you got to that level and having to make a change in your approach to do so.
Yeah, for sure.
Epic Digimonkey, stubborn and competitive, takes notes how to get good. Well, I think the whole point here is because since what you've done since Celeste, I mean, in some of Oracle, see all the Game Boy or Link's Awakening, I've seen some really impressive things that that didn't necessarily take you pushing yourself to some challenging places to do so. So. I guess let's start with this. So you mentioned the first game. So was Undertale your first approach into speedrunning? Like, what got you into doing it? What did you see that kind of motivated that spark to give it a try?
So okay, I played Undertale. I was a little bit late to Undertale, as far as like casual play goes, but I my casual playthrough on Twitch was my first Twitch experience I'd ever had. The first thing I ever streamed on Twitch was my Undertale casual playthrough. And I was like maybe a month later to everyone else, or excuse me, to Undertale, than everyone else was, as far as casual play goes. And then I started speedrunning it. I just said, what the hell? I started speedrunning it. I just started like trying to speedrun because I had already speedrun Pokemon Red glitchless. We don't speak of those days, but but basically, so I started speedrunning Undertale, the True Pacifist route, and it was something that I got hooked on. Honestly, like it was something that I really got hooked on. because like, you know, as opposed to the red glitchless route in Pokemon, there was actually, believe it or not, like no RNG in the Undertale True Pacifist run, aside from like the very beginning of the game. So I was all for it. I was like, wow, it's like, okay, I no longer have to rely on luck. I can just rely on like, you know, my own like skills basically, and I was able to develop them, and it was just a really good like entrance into speedrunning for me because of that. And yeah, so that was basically like my intro into me taking speedrunning seriously, I think, was Undertale.
From a like more casual playthrough perspective, before you started speedrunning, what kind of games would you say that you were into? I mean, you kind of known at this point for playing a lot of different Zelda games and things like that. Were those the type of games you enjoyed casually? Any other games outside of that?
Yeah, especially the classics. I think like Zelda 1 was the first video game I'd ever played, period. So, but I always enjoyed 3D Zeldas as well. Even though I don't speedrun them today, I really enjoy just like the Zelda franchise in general. But like it was weird. Like up until like my high school days, I had played a lot of video games, and then like once I hit high school and like early college, I just kind of like stopped playing video games. Like I didn't play video games at all during that period. I was focused on other things. I was focused on like golf and school basically, and was able to graduate with a high-ish GPA, I guess. Through college, that kind of suffered, but whatever. I'm off on a tangent now. But basically, yeah. So like, I don't know. Like to say that I grew up playing video games is both true and also like only half true. Or both true and not true at the same time. But once it was weird. Like once I got out of college, that's when I started playing a lot of video games. But yeah, 3D Zelda was like the one game or the one franchise that I remember playing a lot in my early days as a kid.
I gotta just share a little personal experience because my first year in college, I lived in the dorms and I didn't have to share any of my games with my brothers, and so it kind of felt like freedom. So, I mean, I don't want to say it was the reason I dropped out of college my first year, but it was definitely the reason I didn't get good grades. It was too much gaming. So, I'm sure everyone has their own experience. So, interesting. That's pretty cool though that you found it afterwards. And I'm glad to hear the entire Zelda series. Doesn't surprise me. I think many of us who are fans of the series, we end up enjoying. I mean, we all have our ones we enjoy more than the others, but 3D, 2D, it doesn't. They're all enjoyable experiences to say the least.
They're just really good games.
They really are. And Nintendo knew what they were doing with those apparently, and still does. That being said, have you played what do you have an opinion on Breath of the Wild? Did you get a chance to play through it? Did that kind of change in the formula? Any opinions about that?
I love Breath of the Wild. It did not sway my opinion of the franchise at all. I think that them going in a different direction, it was ultimately a good thing. And I know that a lot of people say like, oh, Breath of the Wild is great, but it's not a good Zelda game, like whatever that means.
Right.
But yeah, Breath of the Wild is super good. And honestly, there are points where it feels more like Zelda than any of the more recent 3D Zelda games, because like, it goes like, it's a game that truly goes back to the franchise's roots, honestly, for like Zelda 1 and the open world feel. And even though it's on a much bigger scale, and the game is not from 1986. It feels like Zelda's roots, honestly, to me. Like, of course, I said earlier, Zelda 1 was my first Zelda game, my first video game, period. So like to see them go back to those roots was really nice.
I couldn't agree with you more. And so I did a playthrough on stream actually of Zelda 1 after I'd played through Breath of the Wild. And it almost surprised me how much freedom you're given right from the very beginning, similar to the way you are in Breath of the Wild. I still to this day, I feel like it's game changing. Like there, a lot of the 8-bit games weren't designed that way, but this game just said, here you go wander. And as much as some of my favorite games are linear, Ocarina of Time probably is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's quite linear, yet that freedom you have, it feels, or at least the freedom that makes it feel like you have, is a great experience, I think, playing through the game. So pretty amazing still after all these years. So let me ask you a little bit then about Celeste. What was it about Celeste that appealed to you in the first place? And then when you played through it, was it like, oh man, I got to speedrun this right away, or did you play through the first time thinking this is a game that you wanted to try some of these things?
I played through it with the idea and with the sort of preconceived knowledge that Celeste was like going to be like the next hit speed game. So like, of course, that was in the back of my mind as I played it, and of course, I decided to speedrun it afterwards, and noticed at that point, like, I mean, I hadn't, like as a casual player, I wasn't aware of any of the advanced moves like hyperdashing, like jump dashing, or and all that, all the fancy Celeste stuff. I wasn't really aware of that stuff. I found that out afterwards, like when learning the run. So once I got into that, I was like, oh boy, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. And I remember there was a point early on when I told myself that I wanted to be the best in the world at this game. I really wanted to be number one. I wanted to be just like the very best, like at the very top of the game. And I remember telling myself that and coming to that resolution. And like right away, like I was having so much fun. I had so much fun like doing it. And for a while I was at the very top, and I was like, the best in the world at the game. And then there came a point where I no longer was, and I started to get caught up to by guys like Marlin and Bye-Bye and Flatterv and just like a whole bunch of guys started catching up to me, and that's when it kind of started. That's when this being like toxic unto myself kind of started. And basically, long story short, I'm glad that I ended up stopping, because like that just wasn't healthy for me personally. And it's nothing against those guys at all. It's nothing against the competition. It was all me, and it was all my fault. And just like, I feel like I'm going off on a tangent again.
No.
But I feel like I'm not answering the question anymore. But basically, like, yeah, Celeste was one of the best things that's ever happened to me as a speedrunner, and as a person. And it took me to so many great places. It took me to Hawaii. It took me to France to go and do all these awesome things and play in these games and these marathons and these matches and whatnot. But ultimately, I'm glad that it's behind me now, and I'm still very grateful for those experiences, but I'm glad that they're behind.
I got to put some numbers to Celeste because it's a little bit mind blowing. And currently, 4,120 players, 24,000 runs have been submitted on Celeste. It's one of the most competitive speedrun leaderboards of all that are on speedrun.com. And I think that says a lot about the game, and also the people that even think about running it at this level. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious when you get through your first playthrough of the game. The game is just built for speed running. I mean, the developers obviously had to have some of that idea in their head, but the fact that you had such lofty aspirations that you put upon yourself, considering that, because it's interesting speedrunning nowadays, and especially when this game came out, is that we have a bigger community than we once did. And so this was one of those games where I think you could kind of tell there was going to be a community. There was going to be a competitive community around it. So the fact that you decided that you wanted to take on this approach is kind of mind boggling. And can you think, I mean, even after you've gone through this journey with the game, can you look at it objectively? Can you say this is still a great game? These are some amazing runners. Can you look at it with that kind of, even after stepping away from it?
Oh yeah. Like Celeste is still one of my favorite games ever. And I've just kind of resolved to not stream it physically anymore. But like there are times when I still like feel like picking up a controller and playing offline. Of course, not nearly with the prowess as I used to have, but still it's fun. It's a fun game. It's such a fun game to play. And shout outs to EXOK Games, Maddie Thorson and Noel and everybody at that team. Apparently they're working on a new game now.
They just tweeted that.
Well.
Oh my gosh, I was so excited.
I honestly don't remember what the name of it is, but I'm sure I will once the game comes out. But yeah, so back to the actual question. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, it's just like it's such a good game. It's just an incredible game, both in content, story, and like as well as gameplay. It like a lot of things that people or one thing that people overlook, like a lot of people overlook, is the actual like story and like themes that the game pushes across to its player, about like themes like mental illness, depression, overcoming obstacles, and just like it's I feel like, and I almost feel like it's ironic that like while I was playing and like in like the depths of what I was talking about before with like my negative experiences with myself while playing, like it's almost kind of ironic that like
yeah.
I almost didn't listen.
Right.
I didn't listen to the themes that the game had. But I feel like now, now I've overcome it. Now I have actually, quote unquote, listened to a game. So it's you know, it's just a journey. It's a long journey.
I,
So, but yeah, I still really, really do enjoy the game.
I won't say too much to spoil the story because I think part of the fun is going through if you haven't played it before. But there has been some really great articles written in by Verge, I mean Polygon and Kotaku and all these things, kind of observing the kind of impact the game has. And for a game that, I mean, it's not as old as like Zelda 1. The fact that we're already seeing the impact of the game on not just our speedrunning community, but also people in general and identity. And Kotaku wrote this article that just really like hit home. It was like how the Celeste speedrunning community became clear as hell, which if you haven't read it, do yourself a favor. And it's just some really interesting and great observations about how this game has affected so many people in so many ways. It's super interesting. And also just a game that as fun as hell to play. I mean, that's on top of these things where this game can really speak to you as an individual. I assume, I don't want to assume actually, is that one of the things that attracted you was the movement of the game? I mean, it's just really fun to play.
Yeah, the movement and just like I remember being suggested. I think yeah, I don't remember who exactly suggested it to me or suggested Celeste to me, but it's I'm glad that they did. I'm ultimately very glad they did because it's such a good. I cannot stress enough how good the movement is in this game. It's just so fluid, and yeah, I'm glad that I played it for sure.
I know you mentioned you grinded it. I mean, that was part of the way you got good at the speedrun. What are some of the techniques, or if somebody wanted to take on the speedrun, because there's still, it feels like there's a great interest in this game and a lot going on. Where's a good place to start? What are some of the things that you did at the first to just kind of get a grasp on what the speedrun would take and how to get better at it?
Well, I think the first thing I did was I like, upon joining the Discord, I like they had a channel for like strat videos, and that's when I learned about hyperdashing and just like or hyperdashing. And I think like somebody in my chat, I remember in my casual playthrough was saying like, hey, if you hold like diagonal down and just spam jump and dash, you'll go like super fast. And I'm like, oh, and I did, and I was like, oh wow, but it was very uncontrolled. It was very like, okay, well, this works, but only sometimes. Like, I'll bet you there's a way to control this. And sure enough, it was actually kind of simple, like in retrospect. Um, but yeah, basically like there's hyper dashing where you hold down and diagonal or down and the direction you want to go, and you press you essentially press dash and jump at the same time, and you'll have like a burst of speed horizontally. Um, there's and then so what I think really really adds to the depth of the movement is extended hyperdashing, where you extend the hyperdash to the point where you get your dash back in midair, and that's when it gets fun. I think like you have after you dash, if you jump between 10 and 15 frames later, so that's a 5 frame window, you will actually get your dash back in midair. And you can use that to do another thing called an ultra dash, when you are like in the air, when you're dashing from like a high platform and you want to go down, um, you can do something called an ultra dash, which is chaining that dash with another down diagonal dash. Um, and you chain that speed going forward. Um, and it's just like the depth of the movement in this game is so like absurdly good. It's so good. And you can chain that like almost infinitely, by the way. You can gain theoretically like not infinite speed, but like, um I'll just say uncontrollable speed with ultra dashing like that. So like with the right circumstances that is, but I don't think any circumstances like that actually exist in vanilla. But then you have people who mod the game and create custom maps to make something like that more possible. And it's just like, yeah, the community, honestly, like the modding community is incredible as well. I've been out of touch with both the vanilla speedrun community and the modding community for like a long time now, but I hope they're still going strong. I know that they are. Like I've seen, I still follow a bunch of people on Twitter, and I see them post clips of custom maps and whatnot, and it's just like, wow, like this community, these two like sub communities have really gone so far
Uh,
with everything. So like shout outs to them.
I totally agree. It's actually been because I spent a fair amount of time watching the speed runs and people streaming and all that kind of stuff. Seeing the mod community and what they've done with it has really been quite a treat because we've seen, the vanilla game for a few years now, and so the fact that the mod community, not surprisingly, if given the tools, they'll run with it. If there's a game they love, they'll run with
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Just completely take the game in new directions and new tech and all this kind of wild stuff. I'm really been surprised. They're pretty cool to see. Have you had a chance to play any of them yourself?
Yeah, actually, I actually speedran one of them, like quite in depth. One of the ones that I really, really loved was one by a creator named Beefy Uncle, called Glyph. Glyph is incredible, and if you've ever played a game called Fez, which I know that you've probably heard of a game called Fez.
Love Fez.
It really, really hails to that. Everything from like the actual gameplay and content to the music itself. The music was also made by the creator Beefy Uncle, and it's just like it was super super good. Like it was giving me the Fez and the disaster piece vibes, and just like it's so good, and it was so good that I speedran it. I speedran it like actually exclusively for quite a while, as opposed to the main game. Um, but yeah, like the creators of these custom maps just put so much love into them. And yeah, like um, that's not the only one that I played, obviously, but like it was for a while, but like uh there are a bunch of them, and there's actually a collaboration that a bunch of people contributed to last spring, appropriately called the spring collab of for I think it was for actually 2020, not last spring, spring before, sorry, time is mending together.
COVID,
But
that's what happens.
yeah, yeah, basically, but yeah, last spring a lot of people came together and made a spring collab that I actually I contributed to in a tiny way, by testing some of the levels beforehand, like before they were released, and actually finding like doing my best, at least at the time, to make benchmark times for like certain speedrun achievements. So yeah, like I was, even if it was just in a little tiny way, I was happy to have contributed to that as well. So
Important part of the process. So that's
sure.
no, that's really cool. I'm glad to hear that, and it's definitely something, especially if you've played through the vanilla game and are looking to continue on the journey. These mods are definitely worth taking a look at. You mentioned it, so I do want to ask real briefly about it. You have some submissions of Fez on speedrun.com. How long did you run that game for, and what led you to speedrun that thing? I love Fez, by the way. That's one of the reasons I asked.
Oh yeah, I think I had two different stints of Fez running. I think I speedran a little bit. There was one that was mainly focused on any percent, and there was one that was mainly focused on another category, all golden cubes. Both of which I had the record for up until recently. Uh, but yeah, so I think well, all golden cubes I still do, but I think Wilco took my any percent record actually kind of recently. So shout outs to them.
Just a couple months ago.
Yeah. But yeah, I think like Fez was a game that I think I speedran like alongside Undertale for a while, as sort of like a side game, but it became not really a side game at one point. It became like, like my main game for a while, like maybe a couple of months or so. But yeah, those were good times. And Fez is such a chill game to run and to play in general. It's just like, God, playing Fez for the first time was just like it reminded me of what it feels like to get lost in a world in a video game. And it's like it's a puzzle game. And anybody who's ever watched me stream knows how I fare with puzzle games, just in general. And this was no exception, but I didn't care.
Right.
I didn't care at all because it felt like I was getting immersed in a world for the first time in a long time. So like, yeah, Fez is good. Fez is really good.
I think you described it perfectly, and it's the most relaxing platforming game I've ever played because, to your point, it's not exactly a platforming game. It's more about thinking through what you need to do to actually achieve, find the cubes or find whatever you're looking for. And that's, I totally agree. It's one of the most relaxing platform games. All of a sudden I had gone, I'd put 20 or 30 hours into it and I felt like nothing had happened, like I just been relaxing the whole time. Well, very cool. I'm glad I'm glad, one day I made actually, because it doesn't have the largest speedrunning board, but I might actually consider doing that one because it's such a fun, relaxing game. That's a really good point. So okay, let's get to it. Link's Awakening. So I got to say, in AGDQ 2019, whenever the last AGDQ was that we had a full in-person one, I think it was 2020. Thank you. AGDQ 2020. I was in one of the practice rooms and I was helping with a run or whatever. And I remember seeing you doing your prep. What did you run? I can't remember what you ran at 2020. My apologies.
So I ran in the, I ran Link's Awakening 2019 as a bonus game. Cool. But I also ran in the 2D Zelda relay, the classic trilogy relay as well. I had ran Link to the Past there too.
Nice. I remember, and this is kind of what led me down, like, wanting to know a little bit about your approach, because it seemed like every time I was in the practice room, because I was up at doing graveyard shifts as well and volunteer stuff. And so like that was your grinding time and that's when you were prepping and you looked like you were taking it very seriously and things like that. And what led you to start to speed? What was your first Zelda game that you did start speed running in the portable Game Boy, those kind of genres? And when did that start?
The first Zelda game I ever ran was actually so it was the Game Boy Color version of Link's Awakening, the Link's Awakening GX. I think back in December. I want to say December of 2016, or even 2015. I don't remember actually. It might have been December of 2015. I learned Link's Awakening GX as a 12-hour challenge, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I think throughout those 12 hours, I got through Dungeon 3 out of 8. So it is it was overwhelming for me, of course, like if you consider like the only game I had ever run at that point was Undertale. And up until that point, I think that was around the time where punch card glitches got found in Undertale as well. So like I wasn't really used to anything too technical. But like, like Link's Awakening was the first, whereas Undertale was the first game I ever took seriously as a speed game. Link's Awakening was the first speed game that like really challenged me as a from a technical standpoint back in 2016. So but yeah, that was the first Zelda game I learned.
What do you contribute, or what do you see as the challenges? Like, what were the things that pushed you to try things that you hadn't done before? What is it about that game that it created some new challenges for you?
It was just the tech, and not necessarily remembering where to go. Although Undertale is fairly linear, like this game still challenged me mentally as well as physically. But a lot of the tech involved stuff like super jumps. Super jumps were hard for me to learn for a long time. Uh, just other things. God, I'm trying to remember the route. Like, you got me trying to remember the route in like 2016. Oh God. Rooster Skip as well was one. Even the buffered method was hard for me. Rooster Skip, if you don't know, is a double frame perfect trick where you can actually skip getting the rooster. If you know Link's Awakening DX at all, you can skip getting the rooster in Mabe Village with a couple of mid-air jumps using the hook shot and the Rock's Feather. But it is a double frame perfect trick that also has an elaborate way of buffering it to make it 100%. And yeah, that was hard for me to learn first. That was very hard for me to learn. But yeah, it's the first game that ever either physically or mentally really challenged me as a player.
That's an interesting time to start running the game, and for many different reasons. But the fact is, our community wasn't as big as it is now back then. And I'm curious, were these strats, were there other runners? Were you discovering some of these as you go? Were things being shared? Was this information out there, I guess, to even start approaching the tech that goes on in the speedrun itself?
Yeah, I remember back in 2016, I actually went off of a tutorial made by Zorlax7, who was the world record holder for the main category at the time. And yeah, like when it comes to speedrunning, I'm the race car driver. I'm not the engineer. I've always said that. I think I've found one major thing. Like I think there's something to be said though for like the amount of like micro tech that I found. I found tech that makes things more comfortable for me personally as a runner. I think I'm really good at that. Like that's one of my strengths is I am pretty good at making things more comfortable for me, personalizing it. However, as far as major things go, I think the only thing that I've ever found that was worth anything to like everyone was text storage overflow rung warping in Undertale. I know that was a lot of words I just said there. All you need to know is that you can use a text box to rung warp and save like, I don't know, maybe a little bit more time than you would otherwise with just rung warping normally. But it like I said, even that was personalized to me, and like, you know, that was just a way that I could use to do things a little safer or a little bit more comfortable, tailored to me personally. But yeah, they say everybody has their strengths and weaknesses in running, and that's I think that's a good way for me to showcase, or a good way for me to portray like both my strengths and weaknesses. So
almost all of your PBs and Link's Awakening DX have come post Celeste, and I'm curious what you think has changed, you know, Celeste and post Celeste, and still made you successful, and being able to continue to run at that level even post Celeste. What's changed, I guess? How's your approach changed?
Well, a lot has changed. I think like there's basically, so let me see. I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. Playing other games can make you better at speedrunning in general. So like, you know, like you develop better habits, better practice habits. You become more like, you know, your fingers are more used to pressing buttons, if you will, just from like
So
pressing,
yeah.
just from pressing them. And Celeste, I will say, makes you press buttons a lot. So in certain orders as well. And you just like, I don't know, your thumbs and your hands just kind of get used to the motions. And even though it's not the game that you're playing, it makes you better at others, makes you better at other games. So like, you know, it gets your thumbs moving a little faster, you know, like it just like it improves your coordination because you've done this before. Like there's nothing I can think of, like there's no combination of button presses in Link's Awakening that I can think of that isn't done in another game that I play, you know. So like I'm used to that, like my hands are used to that. So like, and I think it was the same thing with Fez when I came back to Fez for a while, because I said that I had done 2 separate stints like just like playing other games. Like I think at that point I had run Link to the Past for a while, before my second stint with Fez, and just like you words basically you just like you get more used to playing video games.
Yeah.
And like, you know, like you just get better at playing games in general, and that I think that's it goes to show with my results for LADX and as well as Fez back then. So
I couldn't agree with you more. And it seems like the more that I got into speedrunning, the better I got at my casual playthroughs of games. The enjoyment was still the same, but it's fun to be good or to know at least what to do.
Yeah.
One of the things I always point out is I'm terrible at Mario Kart and Smash. And yet just through speedrunning and understanding how to use a controller, you know, be able to input quicker and react quicker has made me a little bit more successful this game. Not a lot, but a little bit more than I used to be just because of that. So that's super interesting. When Link's Awakening came out on the Switch, the remake, is that something that when you tried it, did it feel similar? What was like your experience the first playthrough and then picking up those speed runs after, you know, spending so much time with DX?
Well, I think Link's Awakening 2019 was the first video game that I had ever played knowing that I was going to speedrun it before finishing the casual playthrough. Because like Link's Awakening DX was such a big part of like my speedrunning progress, and it just meant so much to me, and like the original game as well meant so much to me, like as a kid, just like so much nostalgia, you know. It was like, so going off on a tangent here on purpose, actually. So Zelda 1 Zelda 1 was the first video game I ever played. Link's Awakening DX was the game I truly remember growing up. So like, just okay, the original question was was how did I feel playing Link's Awakening 2019 and speedrunning that. So like, yeah, like I already knew I was gonna play LA 2019 as a speed game back then, and like I got chills from like just seeing the opening cutscene in the Switch version of LA. It is very different, however. Like the controls feel very different compared to LADX. It might as well be a totally different game when it comes to speedrunning. Like different ways to do different things. The layout is almost the same in the overworld and in dungeons and whatnot, but actually like playing the game as a speedrun is super different because, you know, it's a different engine. It's technically 3D. It's not, you know, it's not 2D sprites anymore. You know, it's actually a little known fact. Actually, I'm pretty sure this is correct. Link's Awakening 2019 was made with the same engine as Mario Odyssey and and Breath of the Wild. So it just goes to show like how different that is than the game that was made in 1993.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just so different, but it's a good challenge, and I already knew that I was going to speedrun it anyway. So, you know, and I'm glad I did overall. It's a good speed game.
It's super fun to watch, just like DX is fun to watch. I've enjoyed it as a fan of both, and I agree. I'm glad to hear you had a similar experience that I did. It's super charming, even considering you know all the story beats and you know what's going to happen, you know where to go and everything. It still works, interestingly enough, and where they didn't. The main story playthrough doesn't change really. It's the same story, right? It's the same exact thing. And so the fact that
exactly, it
still feels good and charming and all those kind of things, I think it's a really impressive feat, I guess, for the developers of Nintendo. I think I remember hearing that it was the same engine. It wouldn't surprise me because that would be the more economical approach, right? Use an engine you've already got built, just repurpose it for something like this. So super fascinating that's the one they still used.
I think that's the case. Don't quote me on that. Yeah. But I think I remember hearing that as well. Like I'm in the same boat as you, but like I just thought I'd say that.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me at all, to say the least, if that was true. So even though the games are dramatically different, when did you decide to pick up Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages, and you know, and round out another Zelda speedrun?
Okay, so Ages I actually knew already as a game back in like 2016. figured I would learn that because I'd already known LADX and I had run that, and I decided to learn Ages, and it was very, very difficult for me. And the route was extremely difficult back then as well, with the old version of Dungeon 2 Skip, which is double frame perfect, double pixel perfect, and also subpixel dependent.
That's the worst.
So and also costs you like a minute or more if you fail it.
Ooh, that's a reset.
So yeah, that's a pretty good sounding trick, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot easier now than it was then. So I decided to relearn the game, and I actually ended up like really, really liking the Oracle's runs, or the Oracle speedruns. So much so that I decided to actually learn Oracle of Seasons as well, to do something called the GBC Trilogy. The GBC Trilogy is so it's Link's Awakening DX, Oracle of Ages any percent, or it's Link's Awakening DX, No Wrong Warp Out of Bounds, Oracle of Ages any percent, Oracle of Seasons all essences, which are the main categories for each of the 3 games today, all together as one run, with only a minute in between runs. So I ran that for a long time as well, for a while. I think it's like a 4-hour run though, so I couldn't run it too often.
Right.
But yeah, Oracle of Seasons actually, it's Oracle of Seasons. The story of that is actually really funny because I really didn't like the run. I didn't like the run at all at first. I thought it was too random. I thought like it was too inconsistent for me to enjoy. And I'm glad that I stuck with it because I was wrong. I was wrong about that. Like, it just turns out like, you know, I had a lot to learn about the game. I had a lot to experience, and I had to have things go wrong before I could have them go right with a game like Oracle of Seasons. So, like, just like I'm talking more about like the enemy movement, the keys, keys especially keys, the bat enemies in Zelda. They're awful in the Oracle games. They're bad.
Bats are awful in all games, but yes, I agree with you, particularly as Zelda. Yes.
Yeah, but you just need to learn how to deal with them. Like, learn how to avoid them. Like, you know, where the best spot to stand or to walk or run or whatever is to avoid them, and to have the best possibility of avoiding them. Learning how to manage my health and my equips. Learning how to manage just like how I carry myself through dungeons, and just like, you know, it was it's a game that challenged me as well. But yeah, so I'm glad I stuck with it though, because it's very rewarding once you actually get the time that you want.
Oh, I'm glad you did too, because we got a chance to watch it just a couple days ago.
For sure.
I want to circle back on one thing you mentioned about Ages, and that is that there is a trick that beat this double frame perfect, sub-pixel dependent. You said it got easier. What about it changed that made it easier? Is it experience, or what exactly is it that made it easier, you said?
So the first, like, okay, so the trick consists of 2 different things. It consists of RNG manipulation, to like into the cave that you go into to perform the skip. That RNG manipulation is it is mandatory, basically, to have the mini Moldorm in the cave be in a very specific place. So all you need to do is just so you go in, you like pull. I'm sorry if I'm struggling with explaining this, by the way. So you go in on a specific tile, you pull up a bomb, like you throw a bomb, or you just have a bomb over your head. You walk to the edge of the hole, you throw the bomb, and then you shield bump off of the Moldorm. And the shield bump gives you an extra boost to your jump. And that basically replaces, like, the shield bump itself replaces the very specific jump that we had to do off of a Keese that wandered over from the other side of the room over the hole previously. So yeah, it's actually like a several frame window now. It's like it's
nice.
It's at least like a 2 or a 3 frame window now, as opposed to being so tight as it was before. But yeah, it makes the run a lot more accessible.
Mitch has chatted about this, and he, especially when you've played a game for so long, but the difference between a 1 frame and like a 3-4 frame window feels
It's
like night
enormous.
and day, right?
It's enormous. It really is.
And I think that's one of those things that only comes with just playing games, so much over and over again that it feels such like a different thing at that point. Yep. So super interesting. And then as for seasons, it was great watching, obviously, the presentation you did just a couple nights ago, if you're listening to this live. And I was curious, one of the great things that I think has worked really well for GDQs online, as much as I would much rather be in person, to be honest with you, one day I can't wait, we can do it safely. But we've seen a fair amount of new runners who have, people who might not be able to attend. And so we're getting exposed to people we haven't seen before. I'm curious, does your approach change when you're preparing for a marathon run as opposed to a PB grind or anything like that? Like, how does your prep change at all for that? Or is it changed at all?
Well, I think, for me, maybe not so much, because like I feel like one of my strengths as a runner is like consistency, and that's basically what you strive for marathon runs. So like in a way, it kind of feels like you're just doing another run. But like I'd say in general for marathon runs, you want to focus on consistency and marathon safe strats. I think like the only thing I really did differently in my run, like I ran Oracle of Seasons on Sunday at about 9:30ish p.m. if you're interested, by the way. But I think the only thing I really did differently was I saved the game at the beginning of Dungeon 8, because Dungeon 8 has a double frame perfect trick, which is difficult. And if you miss it a bunch of times, you are completely drained of resources. So like that you need to do the trick, or that you need to like progress through the rest of the dungeon adequately. So I saved there. I wouldn't normally save there in a PB attempt. But I did save there just in case I ran out of those resources. I could like go through the dungeon again with the resources. So but honestly, like everything else, like it's just about being consistent and getting more consistent. That's basically it. In terms of like prep, I think like my marathon prep, my runs that I did like in the days to come to the marathon, like before the marathon, were just filled with me trying to be consistent. I did a stream where I did 4 completely no reset runs, no matter what, all back to back to back to back. And focused on getting a specific average. And yeah, as opposed to like trying to PB. But there's really not that much difference, honestly, for me. It's just like maybe the focus levels are a little bit more relaxed because I need to pace myself. But other than that, not really any different.
You touched on something, though, that I think is an important part of speedrunning success, any game you approach, and that is consistency. And I know when I've been at my best speedrunning games, I've been consistent at especially the times when you need to be consistent, especially towards end of runs or tough and challenging tricks. And when I've laid off it for too long, or I haven't been practicing the thing I need to practice, the consistency is definitely the first thing to go, and that's when you don't see any improvement. And that's a really interesting point, and it's something that I guess shouldn't be understated how important that is, whether you're doing a live performance in front of tens of thousands of people or whether you're grinding for your own personal PB. I think that's a really good point and aspect to that. For your consistency, is that just something with the reps where I guess I will ask a technical question here. When you're practicing for consistency, are you practicing the full run? Are you doing no resets? Are you zeroing in on individual sections? What's kind of your approach to and through that?
Well, okay, so when I think when I really want to focus on like speed or getting faster, I will do something like individual segments or even like screen practice. Like I'll practice individual screens.
Yeah.
But if I want to focus on consistency, I'll do full game runs. Like for sure, because like, like you can think of like a full run or a full game run as just one segment, and like just doing that one segment will make you better at that one segment. But if you don't do everything, You know, if you don't do everything together, you're not getting better at the whole thing. Does that make any sense?
Oh no, absolutely.
I hope this is making sense to some other folks out there listening, but like basically like in order to improve something, you have to do that thing. You can't just do a part of that thing. Whereas doing a part of that thing might help if you're having trouble with it, or if you're struggling with it, or if it's a particularly difficult part of the run or a segment or whatever, then by all means work on that. By all means do that. If it's like something that you're really struggling with. But in order to get better at the speed run, you got to do the speed run. You know, you got to do the whole thing.
Yeah, I completely agree.
That's my approach to it, and that's just one way to approach it.
Right.
Like that's just my mindset. Don't get me wrong; it's not the only mindset. So keep that in mind.
That's the other great thing. And after 65 episodes of this podcast, I can tell you there are numerous different approaches.
Yep.
And that one works for you. And I think that's actually some helpful info to have out there. Epic in the chat also mentions flow of the run is super. Like stringing those ideas together, they have to work with one with another, with the next. And so that totally agree with that.
But yeah, Epic is totally right there. That is you said basically in like 5 or 6 words what I stammered upon getting across in like multiple. So
and Epic was on the podcast at some point, so you know, there you go.
Nice.
His was only like 20 minutes long. No, I'm just kidding. I think this brings us up to the game that I probably watched you run more recently, and that's Minish Cap. And I've really been kind of I'm glad you've streamed a lot of it, because it's been fun to see the process. And first of all, how have you enjoyed it? What led you to actually want to give it a try after playing the game?
Well, God, that's a good question, actually. Because the final boss of that game is definitely something. Vadi almost made me want to, like, for lack of a better word, rage quit. I think at one point I actually did I had a really sour experience with the final boss of the game, and I won't get into it too long because I don't want to take up too much time here. But basically, long story short, it took me a while to get to the final segment, which the boss fight is not short. And I got to the final segment, and then I died in the final segment. I died like at the very end of the final segment, and I was like, okay, there's no way I have to do that all again, right? Right?
Crickets.
and then the game spawned me before the entire fight, and I was like, all right, you know what? I'm done. I cut stream right there. I was like, you know what? I'm done. Screw this. I'm out. I'm not finishing this. And then the next week I finished it. I came back and finished it. So like, you know, all was well and good. Turns out in the speedrun you can manipulate the entirety of that fight, or almost the entirety of the fight, which makes it believe it or not, it's a very difficult manip, but it makes it so much better of a fight, in my opinion. Yeah, so I kind of got off on a tangent there again. I'm sorry. But totally basically relate. Like the speedrun for Minish Cap has been, I was a little bit hesitant to learn it at first because I like running games on console, and like I wasn't really able to because the GBA EverDrive doesn't have like save states on it, so it would have been really hard for me to like practice individual segments, which is very important. Like for learning runs, like for actually learning the speed run, is doing individual segments and individual parts of the game, like, you know, in a repetitious manner.
Oh yeah, so, totally agree.
So I was a little bit turned off from that, but it turns out the like emulating the game is fine. I wasn't aware of how decent the GBA emulator was, so but yeah, so that was fine for saving states and loading states and doing practice, but then doing runs on console was fine. The latency was a little bit weird for me to get used to, switching back and forth, but like you get used to it. So, or I got used to it. So but yeah, I'm glad that I learned it. And it's been a lot of fun. Like Minish Cap honestly has been like arguably more fun than the Oracle games for me to run. So
Can you put your finger on
Yeah.
why that might be?
It's a bonkers speed game. It's like the first 30 minutes or so are like just pure movement and like not really anything truly exciting happening. Like you're just playing the game normally.
Right.
And then once Cave of Flames hits, and once like midway through Cave of Flames hits, it's like you're not playing the same game anymore. You just you just glitch out of your mind, and you do a whole bunch of stuff in very quick succession, and it's just a really like messed up speed run, and it's a lot of fun. It's fun to showcase.
This is a really strange question. I'm surprised I haven't asked anybody else this before, but on the leaderboards, you put the console as GBI, and I'm curious why do they denote it that way? Is there any differences between if you play it somewhere else?
Not speed wise.
Okay.
But GBI is basically so it stands for Game Boy Interface, and it's a third-party homebrewed replacement for the vanilla Game Boy Player disc, which was made by Extrems. And shout outs to Extrems for this.
Software's amazing.
Yeah. So what I have done, there are a couple different ways to actually use GBI, but basically think of it as just like a replacement for the vanilla disc, the software. So like you're playing on a Game Boy player on a GameCube as hardware, but GBI is just a replacement software for the disc. What I've done is I have all right. So let me use visuals. Okay, I have here an LADX cartridge. Okay, I have here a GameCube memory card. Okay, so you put the cartridge in the GameCube, and I have also here. Let me see if I can open it. I have here Japanese copy of The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker.
Nice.
All right. So you put the. It's actually not my copy. It's Amber's copy.
Oh.
It's what? Oh, it's English. My bad. It's English, but you can do it with a Japanese copy if you want to. So you put the disc in, and you use the disc as a sort of exploit disc. It's what they call an exploit disc. You have data on the memory card, right, which tells the game to crash. Right, it crashes the game and boots GBI. And this is one way to do it. You can do all this with an SD Media Launcher as well, but I don't have one, so I do this. And you can get that data on here with a Wii if you've homebrewed a Wii. So that's what I do. So I homebrewed the Wii, get the data on the memory card. You plug the memory card into the slot, and it crashes Wind Waker, boots GBI, and tells the system to play the cartridge, which is in the bottom slot in the Game Boy player. So that is how I play my games. That's how I play, and that's Game Boy Interface. That's like the more quote unquote hacky way to boot Game Boy Interface. So that's how I play my games.
I just discovered it last year, and it's amazing. It has, it really is. If you want to go through all, because you can make it has a bunch of different display options and things you can really tweak the thing quite a bit. I thought it was interesting that Leaderboard has it listed, and I was wondering, is there any difference between playing that or if you had a Game Boy Advance plugged into something, if you were, if you had the capture card? I don't know. I thought it was interesting that they denoted it that way. So, but there you go. There's the one last thing I wanted to ask you about, and there is something for those that don't know, if you're in the States or if you're in our time zones, TGH streams pretty late at night, usually, starting around midnight Eastern, if I'm getting that right.
You'd think I was European about my sleep schedule or about my stream schedule, yeah.
Yes, and I was curious. I guess I wasn't curious. One of the things that I've always appreciated about watching and visiting your stream is this welcoming, and I consider it like a safe space or a welcoming space. And I'm wondering if that's something you've consciously had to make choices. Like, how do you keep a stream and a community going like yours, where it is safe for all types of people and to be, an inclusive environment? I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
Definitely done on purpose. Yeah. It's I'm so proud of the community that like like we've developed. But yeah, like I seriously, I take pride every day in the fact that, like, people can come in and be themselves, and like in a good way. So it's yeah, that's I don't really have much more to say on that, honestly. Like, I just, like, I'm super proud of this space that we've developed, that we've cultivated, and just like, I'm really glad it can be somewhere where someone can hang out and feel safe and feel good about it.
I totally agree, and I'm glad you've done it because, once again, it's always a very comfortable place to be. And I think almost every time I see you going live, it's something about chill vibes as we, play Minish Cap as fast as we possibly can. But it's definitely lives up to that, and I think. Especially in our community, I just think it's a really important thing to be aware, to be that space and be a place where people can feel comfortable, being a member and being a viewer and being a part of that community. So, pretty cool. Thanks so much. I feel like I could just ask you about your process like all day, but I appreciate you giving just a little bit of insight into these games that you run. And we've been able to see you run now for many years, it seems like, at this point. What are your plans next? Like, what do you want to keep? Any games you want to try in the future, or continue to grind that you're already running as if you look into the future?
Past this, I'm not sure, but I do intend to go back to Minish Cap any %. I ran Glitchless for a while before GDQ, along with balancing de-rusting / staying sharp at Oracle of Seasons for GDQ. But yeah, like, I'm looking forward to getting back to Minish Cap any % and going for 127. So yeah, that's basically it for me. After that, I'm not sure. I might look into learning Oracle of Ages All Essences, but I'm still not sure about that. But we'll see. We'll see. It'll be a spontaneous decision, whatever it is, I'm sure. So.
I've also enjoyed some of the casual stuff you've done recently as well, and I think that's a good way. I've noticed, especially speedrunners who've been doing it as long as you have, I'm really happy to see people mixing that stuff in and feeling comfortable doing so, because as you've mentioned quite a few times, that the grind can be real sometimes, and it's sometimes a break is good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Where can people find you? People want to just go check out the stream or check out some of your runs. Where can they find you on the internet?
My Twitch is twitch.tv/TGH_SR. So yeah, check me out there if you'd like to. I speedrun almost every single 2D Zelda, for better or for worse for myself. Like, way too much 2D Zelda, honestly. But yeah, I also do some casual stuff. I'm getting into Pokemon Ironmon recently.
Fun.
Getting into but I've been mostly speedrunning like the Capcom games, primarily Minish Cap lately. So for Zelda. So
well, very cool
if
stuff.
If that interests you, feel free to check me out on Twitch. So also Twitter is same as Twitch, actually, TGH_SR.
And I'd say maybe a good place to start for y'all is to check out I've been showing your run of Oracle of Seasons from this year, so for GDQ, and it's a great place to start. But if you're at all interested in that kind of stuff, it's a lot of that, and it's always high level gameplay. But with all due respect, you make it look easy, even though I know it's not.
It takes a lot of time, but it's it's fun. We make it fun, sure.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for taking the time, man. I really do appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and good luck on the grinds coming up, man. Good luck to you.
Thank you for having me on, and thanks for watching, and peace.
Thanks everyone for listening, watching, viewing, liking, subscribing, and sharing. All of that stuff goes a long way to helping out the podcast. If you'd like any additional info, you can go to sequencebreakpodcast.com. All of our past episodes, everything's on there. You'll find everything there. If you'd like to watch live, follow the Sequence Break Twitter. That is Sequence Break PC, and you can join in, ask some questions, watch the whole thing live. It does happen. It's not really a set time, but I do post when I go live. Everything else, if you have any questions or anything like that, podcast@sequencebreakpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.